It's Garfield time. So Garfield is without a doubt one of the most recognizable cartoon characters ever. But the Garf today is not the Garf of yesterday. Garfield has gone through multiple design changes over his 45-year comic run. And over this run his design has been perfected and then ruined. And that's what we are talking about today. So the Garfield comic started in 1978, but that is actually not Garfield's first design, because there was a prototype Garf in the John comic, which is basically just Garfield with a different title, which ran from 1976 to 1978. A lot of these comics were remade once the comic had been rebranded, but Garf looks very different here. He is kind of ugly. I don't know why bro looks like he shaved 2 days ago, but then when the actual comic started in June 1978, Garf went from being ugly to still being ugly. Garfield was really fat back then, which is funny to think back on, since that is like one of his core character traits that isn't as prevalent anymore. But yeah, Garf is a very fat cat, like bro is big, he's kinda scary looking. I guess the design is kind of cute or something. The Garf looked like this for about 15 minutes because he kind of started going through design changes immediately. But it was... what's that word? The opposite of drastic. Gradual? Gradual? Yeah. Garfuel, if you will. But yeah, it was a gradual change where you can notice the difference if you jump a few months ahead. But reading the comics every day, it was probably not as noticeable. But the first thing that happened to Garf was that he started shrinking. And just a few months later, he was not as ugly anymore. Because he was like getting smaller and cuter. Okay, cute is not a word I would use yet, because like in September of 1978 he still looks like this. But then 1 month later, in October, my boy is starting to look like a cat instead of this creature. Then in October 29 they whitewash him, which is an interesting decision. By December 1978, I'm not kidding, he has literally like halved in size. Halved. Like John is carrying him like this. Look at his first comic and tell me that John can pick him up without literally dying. We kick off the new year of 79 with Garf consuming some beverage. Champagne? No, it's orange juice or something. Actually, does Garfield show beer and stuff? It might do in the older comics, right? Maybe? Now in January of 1979 I can actually call Garfield cute. Like, I would want to own a car that looked like him now. He is still quite big, but has been shrinking continuously over the first half a year. I'm guessing it might have to do with marketability. Like, I don't want to own a plush of this, but I would buy a 1979 Garf plush if it was very cheap. Like, free, but still. By the comic's 1 year anniversary, Garfield has become a cute little fella. I just want to, like, pick him up. He still canonically weighs more, like, than I can carry, probably. Shout out John. Now, he doesn't change that much for a while now. Like, the jump from December of 1978 to June 1979 is so much more noticeable than from June 1979 to December 1979. Wait, are those both the same length? I just kinda assumed that they both were half a year, since like together the intervals make a whole year. I'm kinda right anyway, it's like 6 months each. But what I'm thinking is that putting a June 1979 comic next to a December 1979 comic, like if you put them next to each other, you would definitely think, or at least you could definitely think that they are from the days next to each other, because he looks the same. Going into 1980, can I just say I love how like every Garfield comic on the new year is always acknowledging the new year. Same with Christmas, it's just like a vibe. But Garfield is so cute right now, he's just so small. This is not cute, however. Get this monstrosity off my screen, please. He gets a short but very interesting design change in this comic. It's, I don't know, maybe cute? Throughout the year 1980, Garfield's design kind of fluctuates a little, but that's kind of common. However, he does stay very cute throughout the whole year. Garfield sure does a lot of interesting stuff this year, but if there's nothing to say about his design here, we should just like fast forward through the year. By November, his design has gotten really good, and I think this watermelon comic is the cutest he has looked yet. Moving into 1981, the Garf design is still going strong. I think this is the most cat-like he has ever looked. Like, yeah, there are probably cats that look like his 1978 design, but that can surely not be healthy. We got a touchdown in April of 1981 and take a look at Bouncing Garfield. This is just amazing. But just a couple months later we start seeing some changes. Garfield is starting to become slightly less built like a bowling ball. He's still a cute little cat, but they are stretching him out every week just a little bit. Garfield stands up more instead of sitting down, and since he is still short and chubby, it looks a little cursed sometimes. And he gets taller and taller, which is noticeable when he sits down as well. It's Garfield, so it's still somewhat of a comic to a comic thing. In some comics I think the cuteness of a year ago still shines through, but then in others it's just a little bit lost. The comics I'm showing on screen right now are all from December of 1981. Let's move into 1982. We immediately get a very unusual pose for Garfield, I feel like, and the next day our boy is walking on 2 feet naturally. It's still a while left until that will be his go-to pose, but it's a sign of what's to come. Okay, so in 1982 I still like Garfield's design. Not much is lost from the perfection that was late 1980, but what I'm doing here is deep diving into his design, so I'm gonna have to get nitpicky here. So on the Sunday strips, Garfield gets a larger comic with more panels. These comics have a title card panel at the top, and also, at least during this time, this little character panel next to it. As we see here, the panel is obviously not part of the story of the comic and it's just kind of there. It has been the same picture, at least with this like different colors for like a year at this point. So this Garfield design here, which is really good, is from 1980. I'm not sure exactly where it's from, but I'm pretty sure it's just a panel taken from a regular comic during that time. But then let's go to February the 7th of 1982. This is not a big thing, but compare how Garfield looks sitting down in the top left frame and him sitting down in the actual comic. It's of course subjective, what you think of it, but the design is objectively different. Our boy is getting bigger again. Garf is still walking on like all fours more than he is walking on 2 legs, and sometimes he gets small and chunky again. I really like this one, it's funny. As we enter July of 1982, Garfield is standing up and it's looking a little more natural. There's not really that much to say for the second half of 1982. I'll show some different panels on screen, but it's just more of the same. He is slightly bigger and taller than last year and he stands up slightly more, but there's no noticeable changes month to month here. Then let's go to 1983. Garfield is getting tall, and he's standing up even more. And here is where I'm gonna say the design is kind of ruined. There's also a separate discussion to be had with how not only is Garfield starting to look more and more humanoid, he is also starting to act more and more human. Like, of course Garfield needs to be taller and walk like a human if he's gonna sit like a human on an airplane. Late 1983 has him be more of what we talked before about. Now again, it fluctuates. Garfield can look a lot bigger and even smaller than he did in 1980, depending on which comic it is. But it's a lot of him standing on 2 feet though. Then in 1984, things change more. From the beginning of this year to the end, Garfield's feet almost double in size. And there's a reason for this. Garfield's evolution from this little boy to this has to do with marketability. Jim Davis may be a great cartoonist, but he's also a great businessman. Davis saw a greater potential in the Garfield brand that goes beyond the comics, well, like way beyond the comics. It was during this era of Garfield that he started Paws Incorporated, essentially the Garfield company. It was now that Garfield became much more than just his strip, with endless merchandise. And with that, Garfield became more marketable. A little Garfield watermelon plushie was not good enough, he needs giant feet. Which kinda sucks since the early Garfield merchandise is goated. But yeah, by late 1984, Garfield has his 2 human legs. And that's a part of his anthropomorphic transformation. He is now just a little more human and a little less cat. Taking a look at 1985 and forward, more of that. The first few years of Garfield was what brought with it the most changes, both to the look of the comic and the actual content of the comic. Like Odie and Lyman were introduced in the first year, Normal in 1979 and Arlene in 1980. After these first years, almost nothing changes. We haven't gotten any new, like, big side characters, and Garfield hasn't changed much except for getting taller and bigger feet. And there's of course a reason for this. They had hit gold for marketability with the big ass feet, tall ass cat design. And if it's not broken, don't fix it. It's not like it's the Garfield comic that brings in money anyway. Did you know that the Garfield merchandise brings in almost $1 billion in revenue each year? That is a lot. And if you want me to get $1 billion in revenue on this channel every year, you should subscribe for more Garfield videos.